The Rebbe began the Farbrengen this afternoon that today is Shabbos Mevorchim Shvat. And the Rebbe went on that we find an expression Tfilasi utfilas Amcha Beis Yisrael, which means that at times we're supposed to look at an inyan, how this inyan is closest to us, and then to look at it from a general point of view. The same applies, the Rebbe continues, B'negeya to the month of Shvat. What it has the most closest shaykhs to us in this month, it's the fact that Yud Shvat, 10 days in the month of Shvat, is the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And this is something which is extremely meaningful to us. And as the Rebbe went on, B'negeya every month, we find that every month has various sirufim of the Shem Havaya, and it's brought in Sifrei Kabbalah that the tziruf of Shem Havaya for the month of Shvat is Homer Yimirenu V'Hoyohu, which puts together the Rebishter's name Yud Kei Vav Kei. This siruf has the shaykhs to Shvat, and it's also brought in Sifrei Kabbalah that every month has a shaykhs to each one of the Shvatim. Which month has a shaykhs to the month to Yosef? It's the month of Shvat. Afterwards, the Rebbe says the following month Adar has a shaykhs to Binyamin. However, the month of Shvat, this has a shaykhs to Yosef. So we see that the inyan of this month, which we're about to enter, the month of Shvat, this has a very strong shaykhs to the Frierdiker Rebbe, whose name was also the name of Yosef. And the Rebbe went on to explain that Bichlal, though the Frierdiker Rebbe physically is not here with us any longer, but based on a letter which the Alter Rebbe writes, and this week we just celebrated the Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit. The Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit was this week on Tuesday, Chavdalet Teves, and as it is explained in Chassidus, that the Shabbos afterwards elevates everything that transpired throughout the entire week. Memela, this day of Shabbos today also has a shaykhs to Chavdalet Teves, because Chavdalet Teves is being elevated on this day of Shabbos, on today's Shabbos. And the Alter Rebbe is the one that writes, and he explains at length, B'negeya Chaya HaTzadik, the life of a tzaddik. Though we're talking about a tzaddik who is extremely suitable to be defined as a tzaddik, von deswegen, when the tzaddik is down on this world, he still is affected by the circumstances and by the environment of the world. However, once the tzaddik passes away from this world, and then his life is not a chayim psorim anymore, it's not anymore a life that's tied into flesh and bound with gashmiistic limitations. Here we're talking about a spiritual life. Once his neshama is chozeres lamaylo, that is when the Alter Rebbe explains, then the tzaddik really functions without any limitations, without anything interfering to the functioning of the tzaddik. Memela, especially based on this letter of the Alter Rebbe, this more brings about the whole inyan of the month of Shvat. And as the month of Shvat has a shaykhs to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and especially that the Frierdiker Rebbe is not bound with chayim psorim anymore, because he's in Olam HaEmes. So this is, as the Alter Rebbe writes, this is when the tzaddik is fully dedicated to his followers. Memela, this month has a very strong significance to us as followers of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe went on that we all are aware very well what the demands of the Frierdiker Rebbe were, and every one of us has at least something of a shaykhs and of a knowledge. We know of the Frierdiker Rebbe's svarim and of his writings and of his teachings. So we know very well what the Frierdiker Rebbe demands from us. So now is the most appropriate time for us to give some serious thought and to see to it, to prepare ourselves to be suitable to the requests and demands what the Frierdiker Rebbe demands from us. And the most suitable time for this is now that we're about to enter the month of Shvat. This, the Rebbe says, is b'negeya the month of Shvat at all times. No difference how the kfiyas of the month of Shvat would be. Especially, the Rebbe says, we always have to take a lesson how each particular year has its kfiyas. So this year we learned the lesson. However, the Rebbe continues, it doesn't mean that in years to come, this Hayra, when this Kviyas does not exist, is not there anymore. It just means that in this year, we learned the Hayra from it. However, we're supposed to follow the Hayra at all times. But said, the Rebbe went on, now we are benching the month of Shvat. Shabbos Mavachim Shvat could be is always rather the Shabbos that we bench the month of Shvat. However, when Rosh Chodesh should fall out, this we can have many differences. Rosh Chodesh could be right away close to Shabbos. In other words, that Shabbos should be Shabbos Mavachim as well as Erev Rosh Chodesh Shvat. And this,
Not by Shvat. Shvat is Wednesday.
but in general, B'chlal, we find such things.
Not by Shvat.
And when we do find such things, we see that it even has an effect on the Shabbos itself also, until a halachic effect. Because that is why there is the halacha is that when Shabbos falls out to be Erev Rosh Chodesh, and at the same time it is Shabbos Mavachim. So when we daven Mincha on Shabbos, we do not say Tzidkas Chatzedek anymore. Why? Because the Shabbos already has a shaychus to the Rosh Chodesh which we're entering. Rosh Chodesh could be, which means that Rosh Chodesh in that case, there is no days elapsing between Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, and we could have Rosh Chodesh Monday, we could have Rosh Chodesh Tuesday, any time in the week that Rosh Chodesh could fall out to be, the Shabbos is still Shabbos Mavachim. This, the way the Kviyas is this year, the Rebbe continues, Rosh Chodesh falls out to be on a Monday. The Rebbe explained what's the difference if Rosh Chodesh falls out to be right from Shabbos we go into Rosh Chodesh, or we have a day in between. So on one hand, it's very close to Shabbos. It's the closest way possible for Rosh Chodesh to be on Shabbos, unless when we go from Shabbos right into Rosh Chodesh, which this is an exceptional way. However, if we should have not a day of Rosh Chodesh between Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, then the closest day that Rosh Chodesh could fall out to be then is on a Monday. Shabbos Bechlal is Mekadsha V'Kaim. In other words, Shabbos is something which has nothing to do with our Avodah. It is something which the Rebishter said, that every seventh day is Shabbos. This is how the Gemara refers to it. The Gemara uses the expression, it's Mekadsha V'Kaim. Memela, it is totally not dependent on the Avodah of Bnei Yisrael. It's something automatic. Automatically, every every week passes, we always have Shabbos. However, when we're talking here about the Inyan of Rosh Chodesh, the Rebbe says, this is already something which is totally b'avodah seinu. This is already something which we have to put our avodah into it, our effort into it. So when we go from Shabbos straight into Rosh Chodesh, we have no time to prepare ourselves to Rosh Chodesh. However, when there is a day in between, and still Rosh Chodesh is right away Sunday night. Monday it's still Rosh Chodesh. That means we are very close to Rosh Chodesh, but at the same time there is a day for us between Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. Why is there this day in between? This day in between is there so that we should be able to prepare ourselves properly. We should be able to do all proper ruchnistic preparations so that we enter the Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the month of Shvat, properly. Together with this, not only do we have that Rosh Chodesh falls out to be on a Monday, which gives us a day of preparation so that we can prepare ourselves properly to enter the month of Shvat, but it's also Parshas Va'era. What's the Pshat Parshas Va'era? Va'era is Maloshen Riyah, Maloshen seeing. The Rebbe says Va'era hat sich bewiesen to whom? Of Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yankov. So Rashi right away comments, Ela Ovis. Actually, the Pasuk tells us that whom did the Rebbe reveal himself to? To Avraham, Yitzchak, V'Yankov. Why is there need to Rashi to comment Ela Ovis? So this is explained at length in Chassidus, that Rashi is stressing something here. Chassidus always tells us that all the inyanim that took place with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, being that they are our avis, all these inyanim have a shaychus to us as well. Why? Because we are children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov. They are considered our avis, our ancestors. Mamela, we take everything in a format of inheritance from the avis. Mamela, so Rashi right away stresses that this inyan of Va'era al Avraham, al Yitzchak, al Yankov, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, is something that has a shaychus to us as well. Because this is what Rashi is hinting by saying the word Ela Avis. And we know that everything that has to do with the Avis has a shaychus to us. So Rashi right away tells us that the Va'era, that the one who the Rebbe revealed himself to, was Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, as others. Memela, meaning that this Indian has to have some sort of a shaykhis to us as well. And here in Pashas Va'era, it's Malosh and Riyah. And the Rebbe here elaborated at length. The Rebbe spoke about the fact that the idea is that we're really supposed to take an insight, an Indian of Riyah, into our own self. And we have to start thinking. We are Hasidim, and we were merited that we learned in Temchet Mimim. And we have the schus that we are Hasidim as well. So we have to make an evaluation for our own self. Are we in the proper matziv that a chassid and someone that learned in Temchet Mimim should be? This is what Pashas V'Eira is demanding of us. V'Eira is the idea of V'Eira is vision. That's the idea of Pashas V'Eira. In other words, we're supposed to visualize on our own self. We're supposed to evaluate our own self spiritually in a format of V'Eira and giving ourselves a real innerliche, a real proper insight. Are we in the proper position that we are supposed to be? Just like the Rebishter was Va'era, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. So this Inyan has a shaykhus to us, and this is what Rashi is Maram Ezela of us. Mamela to us nowadays as well, we are also supposed to evaluate ourselves in a format of a proper insight. Are we taking the proper position as Chassidim should be, as Talmidim of Temchet Mimim should be? Are we living up to these standards? And the Rebbe went on. So this is the idea of Pashas Va'era coming together with Shabbos Mevorachim Shvat, and also the day of Erev Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which is tomorrow's date. What's the inyan of Erev Rosh Chodesh Shvat? So B'negei Shvat, we find the Rebbe says something very special. We find in the Torah that Torah tells us that when Moshe Rabbeinu came into the month of Shvat, Hoyil Moshe Bayer Es HaTorah Hazois Bayer Heitev. So Moshe began explaining the Torah very fluently. So the pasuk is talking about the last month of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away when? On the 7th of Adar. So here we're talking that a little bit more than a month before, from Rosh Chodesh Shvat till Zayin Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in interpreting the Torah. So Rebbe said this is something that the month of Shvat excels with, which we do not find in any other month. This comes to show us that every single day in the month of Shvat has a tremendous shaykhus to the inyan of Torah. The Rebbe says we find in Inyan B'negei the month of Iyar. Iyar also there's an inyan that every day has a mitzvah in it, because every day we count Sfiras Ha'ima, but there it comes only as a preparation to Matan Torah. What's the whole idea of Sfiras Ha'ima? The whole idea of Sfiras Ha'ima is that we were counting the days, preparing ourselves, getting ready to Matan Torah. Because as the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they were so anxious. When will they already receive the Torah that they were counting the days? However, the inyan of the month of Iyar still does not represent the idea of Torah so strong as the month of Shvat. B'negei other months, we don't find Bechlal an inyan of many days that should excel that way. The Rebbe says we find inyan of Kabbalah HaTorah, but Kabbalah HaTorah was something which took only one day. Yitzias Mitzrayim was something which was limited to a certain amount of days, how long it took the Yidden to get out of Mitzrayim. However, we should find an inyan that every single day of the month should have a special shaykhus to Torah. This we find in the month of Shvat. And this is the month that we bench today. And this is the month that we have to prepare ourselves to, because this is a month with real special significance. The fact that each and every day has a shaykhus to Moshe's interpreting the Torah. And what is so outstanding with Moshe's interpreting the Torah? The Rebbe went on. So the pasuk tells us, Hayil Moshe Bayer Es HaTorah Hazois, Moshe interpreted the Torah Bayer Heitev. Very well. So Chazal comment on this word Heitev, that this is when Moshe Rabbeinu translated the Torah into 70 different languages. In fact, Rabbi added that the word Heitev totals the number of 70. So Mamela, it's another step in reaching out with Torah to people who are not as acquainted with Torah. and have not that sort of a shaykhs to Torah as yet. Why? Because they can't understand Torah and it's an original text. Here the Rebbe added on, obviously in Moshe's times, when Moshe translated the Torah, there was probably no need for Moshe translating it into other languages. Why? Because in those days everybody was fluent in the text that the Torah was given and in the text of Lashon HaKodesh. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu right away prepared translation of Torah for generations to come, for later generations to come, when people that will want to have access to Torah, however, because of a language barrier, they wouldn't understand Torah. So Moshe put right away the groundwork before he passed away. This was Moshe's final accomplishment in life, that he set aside a month plus 6 more days, his last month and 6 days, Alei Adomis, which Moshe Rabbeinu lived on this world. What was Moshe Rabbeinu's goal at that time? To translate Torah into 70 different languages, to see to it that Torah reaches to each and every Yid. There shouldn't be a Yid that shouldn't be able to say that he can't learn Torah because Torah is not accessible to him. So Moshe Rabbeinu at that time put the groundwork that Torah should be able to get close and be accessible to each and every Yid. Rabbi added on also that the same Hayrah we find, the same meaning we find, Benegei the Friedeke Rebbe. One of the Rabbeim who really began taking Pnimiyus HaTorah, Torah Pnimiyus HaTorah, and taking Pnimiyus HaTorah and taking it out of its original Lashon HaKodesh contents, and bringing it to people who cannot understand Lashon HaKodesh, and seeing to it that Yidden that cannot understand Lashon HaKodesh should have an access to Chassidus and understand Chassidus and be able to learn in Yonam of Chassidus in different languages. Who was the one that first initially introduced this? It was also the Indian of the Friedeke Rebbe. Talking about this, the Rebbe said this is an appropriate time also here. The Rebbe mentioned again Benegei to the Indian of the Sefer Torah that's being written. And it's very appropriate, just like we say Simchas Torah, we say in the text, with Simchas Torah we finish the Torah. When we finish reading the Torah, we say in the text, Oisin. There's an expression there that tells us how we are supposed to celebrate the greatness when we complete Torah. So from this we see the Rebbe says that the same applies when we finish a Sefer Torah as well. And when a Sefer Torah is being finished, excuse me, I'm sure if we could move in, there's some more chairs. Where should I stand? So the Rebbe added on that it's the most appropriate way to celebrate the theme of the Sefer Torah is to celebrate it in a festive way, in a way with a lot of joy and with a lot of simcha, because just like we find Benegei Simchas Torah, that Simchas Torah we finish reading the Torah, so we celebrate Simchas Torah with a lot of simcha and with a lot of joy. So the very same, when we complete the writing of a Torah, it's most appropriate that it should also be celebrated in a very festive way, and especially the Rebbe added on, it should also be in a way of Roiv Am Hadras Melech, to see to it that as many should participate in it, and this will bring to Hadras Melech the beauty of the... There's an expression, Beroiv Am Hadras Melech, when there's a large attendance, this adds glory to the king. And in this case, it adds glory to the... Which king? To the Melech Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If the participation in the tomorrow's Siyum HaSefer will be in a format of Roiv Am Hadras Melech, the Rebbe added this would be a Hadras to the Melech Malchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also referred to an Inyan Benegei, the whole idea of writing Sefer Torah. And the Rebbe spoke about it, Chavdal Tevis as well, and added on a further explanation today. And Chavdal Tevis, when the Rebbe spoke about it, it came behemshich to the Rebbe speaking about it at previous occasions as well. And this is all based on a shaila which the Rebbe asks in Mispar HaMitzvahs, in the count of mitzvahs. The mitzvah of writing Sefer Torah is one of the Taryag mitzvahs. So the Rebbe asked the question, if we look back in Jewish history, we do not see, and we don't find Yidden that went ahead, and we should have, if it's a mitzvah like all other mitzvahs, why don't we find that Yidden should see to it to be Mekayim this mitzvah? We don't find that there was a special eagerness or a special effort made by Yidden who were Mahadrim b'mitzvahs, and definitely by all means try to be Mekayim Torah mitzvahs to the fullest extent. Still, we don't see that they went ahead and wrote Sefer Torah. Maybe the Rebbe said we were to say that there were many Yidden that wanted to write a Sefer Torah but couldn't afford to write one, and naturally it's something which requires a big expense. But at the same time, the Rebbe says we find people that were well able to afford it, and still we also don't see that they went ahead and wrote Sefer Torahs. Especially being that the whole idea of writing a Sefer Torah is not just because of writing a Sefer Torah. As the Pasuk tells us that the Torah is supposed to be written, the Pasuk from where we learn up the union of mitzvahs, ksiva, Sefer Torah, and what's the goal of writing a Sefer Torah, so that we should be able to learn in the Sefer Torah. So if the whole idea of writing a Sefer Torah is to be able to learn in the Sefer Torah, when is a person mechuyev in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? The moment one becomes bar mitzvah, he gets the chiyuv on himself of he's obligated to learn Torah. So the Rebbe asks, if that's the case, we should have found throughout Jewish history that whenever somebody became bar mitzvah, he should have ran the first mitzvah that he should have done was to go ahead and hire somebody or be trained or whatever, and go ahead and fulfill the mitzvah of writing Sefer Torah. And Achaname, the Rebbe says that in Shulchan Aruch it's brought that nowadays the mitzvah could be fulfilled by purchasing svarim as well. So first of all, this is something which not all poskim agree to. And also this is a b'diavad. It's not the lechatchiladik way of going ahead to fulfill this mitzvah. In other words, the most preferable way is takeh by writing a Sefer Torah. And still we see that throughout history we didn't find the Rebbe said neither by the Rabbeim, he didn't see his father do it. To go ahead and as soon as one becomes bar mitzvah, he should go ahead on the first day or second day and get involved in the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. So the way the Rebbe explained it previous occasions and elaborated on it today as well, is the Rebbe is interpreting this whole inyan with an expression which we find B'negei Korbanos. In B'negei Korbanos we find in Gemara an expression Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim, which means that Bezdin, the Jewish court, has a certain type of a power. And when Bezdin can make a certain arrangement, and this arrangement remains that way, la'ad lo'il me'olam. Just take another example which the Rebbe referred to. For example, Bezdin has a koyach of hefker Bezdin hefker. What's the pshat hefker Bezdin hefker? Bezdin has such an authority that Bezdin can go ahead and take the belongings which belong to an individual person, and Bezdin can proclaim it hefker, make it public. So we see that Bezdin was given various authorities, various koyches, what Bezdin could implement, and this is how it remains. The same thing the Rebbe says applies, just like we find it b'negei korbanos. And by korbanos we find it sai b'negei korban yachid, which means a korban which an individual brought. Person brought his personal korban in the Beis HaMikdash. And here we know that there were various halachas that existed on every single korban. So the question arises, when every person brought his korban, did he have in his attention all the detailed halachas that are required to the korban? So here comes in the explanation that Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim, whatever Bezdin, it's like Bezdin has agreed, and Bezdin has taken, Jewish court, the Jewish Bezdin has taken out and has implemented a takane, that they have already done it, and they have, it is ki'ilu that every person has in mind, b'shas he brings his korban, all the details that are necessary for bringing the korban. This is b'negei korban yachid. The same the Rebbe continues today is b'negei korban tzibur, b'negei a public korban which is brought, what's pshat a public korban? A korban which is brought from public funds, which means that all Yidden are participating in the korban. Here we also come on to the same idea of Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim, that Bezdin has set the rules which apply by each and every korban. So by every korban we don't again have to make sure that these inyanim were intended and these inyanim were kept in mind when the korban was brought, because this was already set as a precedent by Bezdin that by each and every korban these inyanim are there, these inyanim are in existence. The same the Rebbe continues is b'negei Sefer Torah. It is as if Bezdin has set up that every shul owns Sifrei Torahs. And the Sifrei Torah that are owned in a shul, naturally, are not private Sefer Torahs, in most cases at least. In most cases at least, when a Sefer Torah is owned by a shul, it belongs to the entire membership of the shul. It belongs to everyone who comes into the shul. It's a public Sefer Torah. So, the Rebbe is learning pshat, that when a person is called up to the Sefer Torah and makes the bracha b'shem u'malchus on his aliyah which he gets at the Sefer Torah. This is when the person is fulfilling his mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. In other words, being that the whole idea of Ksiva Sefer Torah is not just the writing of the Sefer Torah, so that we shall be able to learn in the Sefer Torah. When does a person learn in the Sefer Torah? When one has an aliyah, that's the pshat, he's learning in the Sefer Torah. So Mamela, when one is called up to the Sefer Torah, and this is his participation in the Velamda of the Sefer Torah, it is Leiv Bezdin Masna Aleim. So that is why the Rebbe says we did not find, it was very rare to find that Yidden should go ahead and write personal Sefer Torahs of their own. Why? Because for us to fulfill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah, the Rebbe is learning, there is no need for every individual to go ahead and write a complete Sefer Torah. We take this klal of leiv bezdin masna aleim, that bezdin is like making up a permanent condition. It's like a permanent set condition which exists eternally, which was set up by bezdin at one point, and from therever we always live with this. And memela, every yid that's taking part, that has a shaykhs to a Sefer Torah, that is kept in shul, by this the yid is fulfilling the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. So the Rebbe says that is why throughout history we did not find that as soon as one became bar mitzvah, he went ahead and wrote a Sefer Torah. Why? Because there was no need for it. Because there's no need for writing an individual Sefer Torah. It is perfectly fulfilled by the public Sefer Torah as long as everyone has an opportunity to learn. And nowadays it's in a way of getting an aliyah in the Sefer Torah. The Rebbe also in the Farbrengen referred to another inyan which he spoke about in the Chavdala Tevis Farbrengen. Chavdala Tevis in the Farbrengen, which is a Farbrengen that has a shaykhs to the Alter Rebbe. So there, in that Farbrengen, the Rebbe made a siyum on the Alter Rebbe's Siddur. The Rebbe said at various occasions he already made a siyum on the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and he had occasions to make a siyum on the Tanya, and it's most appropriate to discuss something of the Torahs of the Alter Rebbe, of the Alter Rebbe's introductions in Torah. So that is why the Rebbe took the Siddur, which is also something which the Alter Rebbe has compiled. This is the Siddur that we daven in, and discussed the way the Alter Rebbe, the beginning of the Alter Rebbe Siddur as well as the conclusion, the siyum of the Alter Rebbe Siddur. And the Rebbe pointed out differences between the Alter Rebbe Siddur as opposed to the Siddur of the Arizal. So the Rebbe in today's Farbrengen just stated on that as far when we talk Siddur or Arizal, there are various Siddurim which were written by various later people, and all these Siddurim are referred to as Siddur HaArizal. In other words, they all follow the Nusach which the Arizal introduced, however with various minor changes and minor interpretations. So the Rebbe said that in general, in Chassidus, whenever Chassidus, the Alter Rebbe or later Rebbeim, the Tzemach Tzedek, whenever they quote the Siddur HaArizal, they quote the Siddur HaArizal which was edited by Reb Shapsei of Rashkev. Reb Shapsei Rashkev. Rebbe says he was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and he put together the Siddur of the Arizal, and with his commentaries and with the way he put it together. Rebbe said there are other Siddurim of the Arizal. Just to mention one, he says there is one which was edited by someone by the name of Rabbi Yankiv Koppel. However, the Rebbe says we always notice when Chassidus refers to quote something from the Siddur HaArizal, which was edited by Rabbi Yankiv Koppel, it's always mentioned befeirish. So, because why? Because normally Chassidus refers to Siddur HaArizal as the Siddur which Reb Shapsei Merashkev edited, and in Mela there is no need always to stress that this is Reb Shapsei's Siddur. However, when Chassidus refers to a Siddur which was not edited by Reb Shapsei, meaning any other of the Siddur HaArizal, then the Rebbe says it's most appropriate to refer to this, to mention by name which Siddur HaArizal is referred to. The Rebbe again said that the way he spoke in the Farbrengen of Chavdala Tevis, the siyum which he said in the Chavdala Tevis Farbrengen, this was also referring to which Siddur of the Arizal, the Siddur HaArizal which is usually quoted in Chassidus, the one which was put together by Reb Shapsei Merashkev. Farbrengen, the Rebbe also referred to last year, the end of last year, there was a Yaiman, there was a diary published by one of the Bacharim, published something. He put together everything that took place in 770 throughout the entire last year. The brief things that the Rebbe spoke briefly, whatever took place at every Farbrengen, and anything special, anything which he knew of worthwhile mentioning, that took place throughout Tafshin Mem Aleph. All of this was put together in a Yoiman. Not getting into details, last year, if you recall, came out to mention here also, it was one of the Shabbosim, Shabbos Rish Chodesh Menachem Av. And when the Rebbe said the Haftarah, the Rebbe said 2 kapitel in that Haftarah. In other words, the Rebbe said the Haftarah that has a shaykhus to Shabbos Rish Chodesh Menachem Av, as well as the Rebbe said the Haftarah from the Friedike Shabbos, from a Shabbos a week ago, which was the first Shabbos. In other words, this was the second Shabbos of the 3 weeks. So the Rebbe said the Haftarah of the second Shabbos of the 3 weeks, plus the Haftarah of the first Shabbos of the 3 weeks. And this took place while davening. And later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe corrected himself, so to speak. I'm using this expression. Rebbe just said that it shouldn't be. It happened, and the Rebbe explained why it happened, what led him to do this. But the Rebbe said it should not be taken as a hero in the future years, that Haftarah does not have to be said that way. Every Shabbos has its Haftarah. In this Yoiman, in this diary, it seems like this Bacha wrote that not only that the Rebbe said the 2 Haftarahs, but the Rebbe also said a Haftarah of Hashamayim Kisi, which is a Haftarah, the regular Haftarah of Shabbos Rish Chodesh. The Rebbe said, being that it's something which is printed, and something that's printed usually could be carried away and things that will be taken for granted, that it is so. Rebbe referred today, Rebbe said there's a Rambam. The Rambam tells us that the whole concept of Eidus, we believe witness. Why do we believe witness? Why did the Torah tell us that when 2 people come and say that this and this happened, we believe them? So the Rebbe said that the Rambam learns it's Gzeiras HaKosov. It's Gzeiras HaKosov. The Torah has told us so. Torah has introduced this concept that when 2 people come and say that something happened, we have to believe them. Mela, the Rebbe said something very unwanting could come out of here. Says something is put into print, and obviously it was put into print by Eidus, by people who claimed that they saw so. The Rebbe says it was not so. He says bididi havuvde. He's the person that with him it happened. So Mela, he knows what he did. And he did not say the Haftarah of Hashamayim Kisi at that Shabbos. And even why he did say the other Haftarah, he already explained in that Shabbos the Farbrengen, but he's just he's declaring the Rebbe as an official statement that as it is stated in this Yerman, in this diary, that he also said the Haftarah of Hashamayim Kisi is wrong, and he didn't say it. He says either the people that were busy not listening to the Haftarah, they were busy looking at others, observing what other people are doing, and Memela, they didn't notice how he really said the Haftarah. But he's stating it officially that he did not say the Haftarah of Hashamayim Kisi at that Shabbos, and Memela has no shaykhus to mention that he said the Haftarah of that Shabbos. As usual, the Rebbe learns a Rashi in the Farbrengen and also a Pirush of the comments of his father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, on the Zohar. Benegeya the Zohar, and it's a Zohar in this week's Sedre, where the Zohar describes the Ptira of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, the passing away of Rashbi. And the Zohar says, Osur Rab Elazar v'Rab Abba v'Noshki Yod. They came and they kissed his hand. Bocha Rab Abba cried, he wept. V'Omar, and he said, Vai, katistalik ma'alma. What's going to happen when Rashbi will pass away? And he also adds on the words, V'yishtayer alme yosuminach, and the world will remain orphaned from Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Man yochel anhore milin de'araisa, who will be able to illuminate for us and bring light for us the words of Torah. In other words, they were expressing sorrow and they felt very bad, and Rab Shimon ben Yochai is about to pass away. So the Rebbe said that his father, in the comments, every word of Rab Shimon ben Yochai is extremely accurate. So his father in his comments is learning Pshat. We see Rab Abba is expressing himself on 2 inyanim. He says, what's going to happen? Katistalik me'alma, when Rab Shimon ben Yochai will pass away. That's one inyan. Then there's another inyan, v'yishtayer alme yoseminach, that the world will remain orphaned from Rab Shimon ben Yochai. What's the pshat both of these inyanim? So the Rebbe said that his father gets into a whole in-length explanation on this. But basically the pshat is, the Rebbe said that there's 2 inyanim. First of all, he wept on the fact that Rab Shimon ben Yochai is going to pass away. However, there's another inyan. There's an inyan. Gemara tells us, Ma zaroi b'chayim afu b'chayim. The Gemara tells us, B'negei Yankov Avinu. Yankov Avinu loy meis, the Gemara says, that Yankov Avinu never passed away. Why? Because being that his children are alive, it is considered as if Yankov would be alive. In other words, the children going in his path are here, so it's considered as if Yankov would be here. So Mamela, the pshat is, there's another word. Yishtayer alme yosu minoch. The world will be left orphaned from Reb Shimon ben Yochai. However, if Reb Shimon ben Yochai is Talmidim, as Reb Abba was one of those Talmidim, and Reb Abba is Zaroi B'chaim, he's his children that are left alive, and Mamela gives consideration as if Reb Shimon ben Yochai would be left alive. Mamela, this is a separate inyan. So Reb Shimon ben Yochai Taka will pass away, so we weep and we express condolence on the passing of Reb Shimon ben Yochai. However, this does not mean that the world has to be left orphaned, because as long as there are his disciples around who are here to teach Torah, the Torah that they have learned and received from their Rebbe, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, this will leave the world in a position, as Reb Abba was one of them, this will leave the world in a position that the world will not be orphaned. This is the Nekuda of the Zohar which the Rebbe explained in today's Farbrengen. Benegeya, the Rashi which the Rebbe spoke about, the Rebbe learned in Kapitel Tes, Pasik Chov Daled. And this is Makas Borod. Makas Borod, the Pasik says, Vayihi Borod ve'eish mislakachas b'toich haborod. There was a hail, mixed with fire, koved me'oid. Asher lahoyu chamayu b'chol eretz Mitzrayim me'oz hoysol agoy. Since Egypt ever turned as a nation, they never had such a strong hail in the land of Egypt. So Rashi quotes, Mislakachas b'toich haborod, something very kochik, very burning very hard in the hail. Rashi says, Nes b'toich nes. This was one miracle mixed with another miracle. Ha'eish v'haborod mu'uravin. The hail and the fire were mixed. So Rashi adds on, Haborod mayimhu. What's hail? Hail really is water. So when water mixes together with fire, this in itself is a miracle. So the Pasuk says, Rashi is learning Pshat in the Pasuk, that there was a double miracle here. First of all, the fact that was such a strong hail, such a strong borod. That's one thing. Secondly, something stronger. The fact that this huggle, this hail, was mixed with Eish. And normally Eish and Mayim don't come together. And here it was in one miracle additional. In the other miracle, Nes B'Teich Nes, what the Rebbe made, comes to show that Lasis Ritzoin Koinam Osu Sholem B'Neim Rashi Edzon. That in order to fulfill the wish of their master, the water and the fire made shalom and joined in together, and this is how it came down in Mitzrayim. The Rebbe asked many questions on this Rashi in today's Farbrengen. First of all, he says there are comments on Rashi. Before Rashi get involved, what's the Nes B'Toich Nes, which he's not even going to get involved into these details. First of all, the Rebbe said, in this concept of Nes B'Toich Nes, we have a Gemara in this Sedra as well. And that is a little earlier. When Moshe and Aaron came to Pari, and Moshe came, Kapitel Zayin Pasuk Yud Aleph. And Moshe and Aaron came right after Revi, with the stick. And they took their stick, kachas matcha v'hashlich lifnei paroi, and the stick turned into a tanin, turned into a snake. So vayikra gam paroi l'chachomim l'machashvim, Paroi called his magicians as well. Vayasu gam heim chatumim mitzrayim belateim kain, they also did the same. Vayashlichu ish matayu, they all threw their sticks. Vayiyu lisaninim, and it also turned into snakes. So here Paroi proved, same type of chachmeh which Moshe and Aaron were able to do, his magicians were able to do as well. However, the pasuk continues, Vayivla matei Aaron es matoisam. What happened was, the stick of Aaron swallowed the sticks of Paro's magicians. And the Rebbe added on that there's a medrash, that the medrash says that something remarkable took place. That the stick, Aaron's stick, did not become any thicker after swallowing all their sticks. So the Gemara refers to this whole inyan which transpired here also as a neis b'toich neis. It's a double miracle. So if Rashi is getting involved to tell the child who's learning Chumash what is a double miracle, what is a neis b'toich neis, why doesn't Rashi mention anything of this nature when Rashi is learning, when we're learning the psukim right after Revi, Pasuk Ches, Tes, Yud, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Rashi bypasses and does not make mention anything of the Gemara that the same thing that happened here was a double miracle. So Rebbe explained that over there in Pshutei Shel Mikra, Rashi does not consider it as a neis b'toich neis. Why? Because the fact that Matei Aaron turned into a tanin, turned into a snake, this cannot be considered as a neis in Pshutei Shel Mikra. Why? Because Chatumei Mitzrayim, the magicians of Mitzrayim, also had the same accomplishment. So for the child that's learning Chumash, Rashi can't tell him that this is a neis b'toich neis, there's a double nes that happened here. Why? Because the fact that Moshe Aaron's stick turned into a tanin, turned into a snake, this is not that much of an outstanding neis because the same Chatumei Mitzrayim were able to accomplish as well. However, later, and to change back also because it seems like they also were able to accomplish that. However, all that happened there was that after Moshe and Aaron's stick changed back from a snake into a mater, and that is when it swallowed the sticks of the Chatumei Mitzrayim. And here,
had theirs also changed back?
Yes, yes. Yes. You see, Vayivla Matei Aaron es Matoisam. So everything is back as a matana. But here the Rebbe said, and while talking about the Matei Aaron, the Rebbe said, from here we can derive a tremendous inyan in Ruchnius, in Avodas Hashem. This the Rebbe says, at times in Avodas Hashem we are forced to attack somebody. In other words, we are forced to attack him, and not for any personal reason whatsoever. It's a result. If we want to protect the Rebbeishter's name properly, we want to protect Kavod Shamayim, and it shouldn't come to a Chilul Hashem, there are many times where Al Pi Din and Al Pi Shulchan Aruch we are forced to take stricter measures. So from here we see the type of strict attitude we are supposed to take in an Inyan Shel Shem Shamayim. There is a tanin and there is a mata. Tanin means a snake, and mata means a stick. What's the difference between a snake and a stick, the Rebbe explains? The difference is very obvious. A snake, when the snake is harmful, it's done with poison. And a snake is a real harmful item. However, when a stick harms, the Rebbe describes, a stick has no life in it. And a stick is cold. A stick is a stick. There's a tremendous difference between a stick and a snake. From here we see that when Moshe and Aaron's stick went to swallow the sticks of the Chatumei Mitzrayim, it could have happened two ways. It could have swallowed as a stick, and could have swallowed when it was in the format of a snake, because Moshe and Aaron's stecken turned into a tan and it turned into a snake. So we see the Torah tells us, Moshe and Aaron here had to teach Paro a lesson. Paro enslaved the Yidden, and they wanted to impose on Paro that Paro should release the Yidden. So naturally, they could have been in a format that Moshe and Aaron's snake should swallow the sticks or snakes of the Chatumei Mitzrayim. It wasn't that way. Why? It comes to teach us a lesson that even when we have to come out strong and it's required to be heard loud and protesting on any Inyan Shel Kedusha. However, at the same time, it's not to be done, in the spiritual sense like a snake. It's be done in a spiritual sense like a matter, like a stick. We have to do it, but we don't do it with a koch, we don't do it with a geschmack. We are forced to do it, we're forced to such a position. But the Inyan of going strongly on somebody, attacking on somebody, not at all in a way of a snake, only in a way of a matter, only in a way of a cold dinner shtekel. We have to do it, we have no alternative, but it has to be done only in a way of a matter, not in a way of a tani. Getting back to the Rashi that we're learning. The Rashi B'negei Borot.
So why isn't Neis B'Tech Neis?
The Gemara refers to it as a Neis B'Tech Neis. However, in Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi doesn't refer. Where are we talking?
In Pshuta Shel Mikra, since a stick swallowing a stick.
Because they were also able to do the same.
But for a stick that swallows stick, it's a big Neis.
So it's one Neis.
One day.
So it's one Neis, not Neis B'Tech Neis. That's why Rashi, who's sticking strongly to Pshuta Shel Mikra, does not bring that Gemara. Gemara Taka tells us, but Rashi doesn't bring it. However, by our Inyan, Rashi does refer to it as a Neis B'Tech Neis. So first of all, the Rebbe asks, why doesn't Rashi quote the word of Eish? Being that here the whole Inyan that makes it for a Neis B'Tech Neis is the fact that there was Eish here. Rashi should have quoted the word Eish. Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, Mislakachas B'Tech HaBorot. Why doesn't Rashi quote the word Ve'eish as well? We know the Rebbe's shitta is always that the words that Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, these are the words that Rashi is telling us Pshat. Also the Rebbe is asking, what's the Pshat? To fulfill the will of the Master, the Eish Mayim made Shalom. Actually, when the Rebbe, who is the Master? The Master of all these things is the Rebbe. So the Rebbe, he is the one that put this tendency into water. He's the one that put this tendency into Eish, this nature. The Rebbe now can go ahead and change it. What's the pshat that the water and the Eish made Shalom b'nei? Just like when we learn the beginning of the Makkos. We learn about the Makkah of Dam. What happened by the Makkah of Dam? The Rebbe created water. So by nature, this thing is water. However, the Rebbe was geyser. The Rebbe decreed that instead of it being water, it should act as blood now. So it went ahead and changed its nature. It became blood. The same thing Tzvardeya, or the same thing any other type of the Makkos. We don't find an expression that Rashi there should tell us that there's a opinion of Asiyah Shalom. This is the Boirei Olam. The Rebbe, he's the one that created everything. Memela, just like he created that normally Eish and Mayim are not together, cannot be in harmony together. Here the Rebbe was the one that performed the miracle because he's the one that has created all this. So he was able to make an exception here, and that Eish and Mayim should be in harmony. So what the Rebbe is explaining, the Rebbe is learning Pshat in this Rashi. Actually, the Rebbe says, Borod is Mayim, Borod is cold. Anything that's blended into Borod in a way of mislakachas at a high heat is already a miracle. Irrelevant if it's Eish or it's something else. So that is why there is no need for Rashi to quote the word Eish, because the main idea isn't the words of the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Mislakachas b'toich habarad, there was something which was burning very strong. In the barad, barad is a hail. Hail is liquid. Hail is mayim normally. Child, the Rebbe says, knows what the tendency of water is and what the tendency of fire is. The Rebbe says, children at Havdalah notice that the Havdalah is put into wine which is a liquid. Memela, this closes the fire of the yesh. So Mamela, a child knows very well that Ben Chumash Lemikol was learning Chumash, and is the child that observes what's going on around him, realizes very well that Eish and Mayim cannot exist together, and that Mayim destroys Eish, as he sees in the Havdalah every week. So if the pasuk says here, Mislakachas b'toich habarot, there was something which was very kochadik in the barot, whatever the thing would be. Rebbe says, it mustn't necessarily be Eish. Rebbe says B'negei Shabbos, there's an expression in Gemara for a child. Here we're talking for Ben Chamish Lamikra, but when the child gets older, he'll come across an expression. There's an expression which is often quoted in Masechta Shabbos, Ishishis. Ishishis means a metal dish, a metal kela. And it's also something which could be very, very strong on fire. It mustn't necessarily be mamish, a burning fire. Anything which is kochadik, as the word is in Yiddish. So if the pasuk says mislakachas b'toich habarot, there was something very kochadik, burning very strong in the barot, it mustn't necessarily be Eish. So Mamela, Rashi right away gets involved in an interpretation that is a nes b'toich nes. Eish v'habarot mu'uravin. There was something which is very hot, and barot which is very cold, which is liquid, and here it got blended together. What happened was, Moshe is coming to Paroi. And Moshe is telling Paroi, listen Paroi, you have to release the Yidden. The Yidden have to go out of Mitzrayim. So Paroi says, Why do I have to release the Yidden out of Mitzrayim? My Inyan Pari says his Inyan is Gevurah. His Inyan is to enslave the Yidden, and he's aware that there's an Inyan that the Yidden have to beat down as slaves in Mitzrayim. And Memela, his Inyan is Gevurah, not Mayim, not Chesed. Memela, that is why he's enslaving and keeping the Yidden as slaves there. They should work for him. So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling him, true. The Rebbe Shtataka wanted that the Yidden should be Avodim in Mitzrayim. However, the Rebbe Shtataka wanted this only for a limited time. The Rebbe Shtataka wanted Va'avodim v'inu oisam arba mea shana. It has to go on for a period of 400 years from the birth of Yitzchak till now. Once this period has already passed, the Rebbe Shtataka wants that you have to release the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Memela, now the time has come for the Yidden to go out of Mitzrayim. So you, Para, you cannot say that your Inyan is Eish. Your Inyan is Eish shows on Gevurah. Memela, Para's Inyan, by the fact that he kept the Yidden as slaves in Mitzrayim, this resembles the tendency of Eish, the tendency of Gevurah. So here Moshe Rabbeinu is telling him, look, the Rebishter has performed now something which is out of the unusual. The Rebishter took Eish and Mayim and put it together. Though this is something which under normal circumstances cannot happen. However, to fulfill the will of the Master, Asu Shalom B'neihem, Eish and Mayim made Shalom amongst themselves, and they have joined together, and this is the type of Makkah which Mitzrayim has just now received. Moshe Rabbeinu is concluding to Paroi, you also have to do the same. You have to take Eish Mayim and put it together. What's the Pshat Eish Mayim and put it together? Until now you were Eish. Until now you were expressing the thought of Gevurah, of keeping the Yidden slaved by you. However, now you have to take this Eish and mix it together with Mayim. Mayim shows on Chesed. And release the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. Memela, this is the whole idea of this Makkah, is something which has not been reflected in the Makkahs until now. Because in this Makkah here is reflected the idea which slugs up the Taina of Pari. Pari was screaming, I'm doing the right thing. I know that the Yidden have to be here as slaves. Memela, I'm keeping them here as slaves. So Moshe Rabbeinu was telling him no. The Yidden took it for a certain time that they had to be as slaves, they had to be. However, now the time has come that you have to release the Yidden. And just like we see in nature, that Las is Chetzayin Kainam, Asu Shalom B'neihem, Eish and Mayim made Shalom amongst themselves. As long as to fulfill the will of the Rebishter, you, Paroi, now have to do the same. And you, Paroi, have to... It's your Inyan, Paroi, now to go ahead and release the Yidden and show that you're also doing just like the Rebishter has just now introduced into nature. We know that, Rebbe referred, there's an expression, Kutshabrichu loy ovid nisa lemagona. The Rebishter does not make any type of nes without a reason. A nes is made, there's a reason for it. If here there was an additional nes, the Rebishter made a double type of nes. Why did the Rebishter make it? Because the Rebishter has a reason for it. Because the Rebishter is doing this to show you, Paroi, that you now have to follow the same approach. You cannot claim that you are only Gevurah, you are only Eish, and that is why you're keeping the Yidden. B'shibud, Mitzrayim, you also have to release them now and show that Eish and Mayim is being Murav Yachat. This is how the Rebbe learned Pshat. Rash in today's Farbrengen.
So that's why there's the beer of, let's say, Barid Mayim, who's the last that should take credit.
Yeah, because actually the child knows, the Rebbe asking the question, the child is well aware that Barad is Mayim. Child goes in the street, he knows that Barad is Mayim. However, this is all negayed into the Hezber of the Inyan. The explanation of the Inyan here is how Moshe was using this as a method to convince Paroi that the time has come for him to give up the slavery which the Yidden were into and release them and let them go out of Mitzrayim.
What about Chaftal Teres? Few words.
Few words. The Farbrengen, we'll leave Chavdal Tevis. We only go over the Shabbos Farbrengen. Whenever there's simultaneous relation, we don't. Could be. And towards the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe again was me'orer that everyone should be announced about the completion of the Sefer Torah and the Siyum, which will take place tomorrow. It was announced by the Farbrengen as well that tomorrow, 2 o'clock at the New York Hilton Hotel, will be the Siyum of the first Sefer Torah, which was written for unity of Achdus of Klal Yisrael, which has a participation of over 304,000 Yidden. And the Rebbe urged very strongly towards the end of the Farbrengen again, to see to it that everybody participates in this Siyam HaSefer. Incidentally, I don't want to... This week, when the Rebbe wrote correspondence about the Siyam HaSefer, the Rebbe wrote that this is a tremendous opportunity. And since Lubavitch is in America, for the past 42 years, there wasn't such a great inyan as the inyan of Siyam HaSefer Torah, which is taking place this Sunday. The Mela the Rebbe writes, we have to realize how important it is for each and every one of us to participate ourselves, and if possible, and wherever possible, to see to it to get other Yidden. The first words which I said, this I know the Rebbe writes, fight, I don't know, but it gives the meaning of it we can understand, and the importance of it we can understand. The Rebbe writes that this is the first time in 42 years, since Lubavitch is here in the United States, that we have such an inyan, such a great inyan, we can understand the importance of this inyan and see to it that we all participate and try and get as many participants possible in tomorrow afternoon Siyam HaSefer, which will take place, as the Rebbe added today, that should take place with a tremendous amount of simcha. Just like we make a simcha and simcha's Torah, the same simcha applies to the Siyam of a Sefer Torah. And towards the end of the Farbrengen, after the announcement was made about tomorrow's Siyam HaSefer, the Rebbe started himself the Nigen, his father's Nigen, which is a Nigen of Akofis, which also has a shaykhs to simcha's Torah, which showed the Rebbe's participation and the Rebbe's expression of simcha in this Siyam Sefer Torah.
Which means children also.
Type of fire and cypher water. Because the Rebbe didn't want fire only should fall.
It doesn't seem like such a big miracle, fire and water mixing. You see it.
It's a miracle.
You ever see it?
Fire burning in the water.
In a way of a rain on an entire Medina, you don't see it. Like,
There's no time.